we started to take the paper off this wall, but I've got a bit of a situation I want to show you here. You can see where, it's kind of hard to see it on camera, but you can see that the wall is starting to bow where the keys have come off in the back of the drywall. So there's a large section in here, in this area, where they put tape on the well, they put tape on the walls to hold it together, which I'm sure worked really, really well for a number of years. It's time to fix that. So you can see we've got one really large crack even coming through the paper here that comes through and pushes all the keys out. So I don't know until I get this paper off if we're going to be able to save this area or not. So now it's time to get into this wall and do some plaster repair. As you can see, we've got some pretty serious bowing in here on this one. This whole section is coming out probably maybe up to like 3 inches, more than I think I've normally had to deal with here for sure. Don't think I've ever pulled one that far out back in again, so it's going to be a bit of an experiment, I guess, to see how much I can get away with on this one. Not a difficult process. You want to be pretty strategic with it, drawing out the holes to pull it back in bit by bit. So we'll see how it goes. Here's a closer look at another disaster wall, just to give a better idea of what I'm talking about. So when we do this drilling into the plaster, by the way, I recommend using a masonry bit. This stuff will destroy any kind of cutting blade or bit. The idea is that you want to be in the center of the lath, going through the plaster only up until the point of the lath, so that you can actually access the space in between the lath and the plaster when you put the construction adhesive in. So it's going to push it out slightly, blow it back, and then when you put the washer on to clamp it, it's going to pull it back in there and get a really good lock on both sides and bring the whole thing back together again. I do highly recommend that you be careful and pay attention to try to stay in the center area. You can get some breakage like down here and actually strip out the screws as they go in and not get nearly as much clamping force. So that's the basic idea, and it seems to work pretty well. Typically, I would say keep your spacing about every 6 inches or so apart on the loose lath, and what I try to do is to offset them so that I've got kind of a triangle pattern, so that if I have any of the adhesive drip down below, it's not overlapping where there's another hole already. So obviously I'm trying to be very strategic here in how I'm pulling this back in to the lath. The holes are probably roughly between 4 and 6 inches apart in multiple directions, and I'm also trying to maintain some overlap in between, or to not overlap in between, so that when I inject adhesive into this one, it'll fall between the other two instead of falling directly over top of one of the holes I've already made. So I'm going to get better coverage that way. I'm going to work basically I'm going to work my way in from the least bowed up into the most bowed area, and hopefully be able to pull it back into proper shape without any further breakage or having to take any spacing or out, without having to make any cuts or take out of material. So I've drilled my holes, I've made sure that I'm on top of my lath, I've vacuumed it all out. There is a special bonding adhesive spray that you can buy to do this as well. I haven't found a real strong need for that. This PL construction adhesive actually works really, really well, and seems to get right into the plaster. So it's worked phenomenally well for me so far. So without further ado, here we go. These are definitely worth their weight in gold. They're actually a product that came with a foundation waterproofing membrane from DMX. and they are fantastic to use for holding clamps to pull plaster back in. They are absolutely worth probably double their weight in gold. Far better than fender washers, and these are, because they're poly, the construction adhesive also doesn't stick to them really a lot, so it's much easier to take them off. Doesn't damage the wall when you remove it as well, so that's super handy. I can't say enough good about using these for this. They're perfect. It came with another product that I happen to need, so I've got a great big huge bag of them, and yeah, I'm sold on these. These are so much better than the fender washers, unless you want to sink the fender washer into the plaster to hold it permanently and then cover it over with drywall compound. Then, you know, that's definitely the better way to go for that kind of scenario. But if you're removing the clamps, this is by far the best way to go. One other thing that I like using these poly washers is that you get a tremendous amount of conformity with them. When you're pulling something in, you can overlap the washers like that and still actually have it pull right in and give good compression around that, and it will just back off where you've got your overlap. So that's been really useful as well. So you can see, for sure, it's a bit of work and it takes its time. You've got a couple of coats of plaster that you've got to put on. It takes time for the glue to dry. There's a number of different things that slow you down, but you do have the benefits of maintaining a plaster wall that is much more mold resistant and much more fireproof than your drywall is ever going to be. Still maintains the spacing around the trim and everything without having to modify any of that. And I think personally it's a much better end product than drywalling over top or pulling everything down and having to clean up the mess that goes with that. So here's the finished product. I think it looks pretty good. If you have any other comments or thoughts on how to do this, I've got lots more to do in the house so we can give it a shot. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and I don't know. Thanks for watching.